For years, the sun barely shone. Crops failed, hunger spread, and empires weakened, yet no one knew why it was happening. Imagine waking up one morning to find that the sun has turned into a pale blue ghost of itself, casting no shadow and providing no warmth. This was not a momentary eclipse or a passing storm. It was a permanent twilight that descended upon the world and refused to leave for 18 months. In the year 536 AD, a mysterious fog rolled across Europe, the Middle East, and parts of Asia, plunging humanity into a literal dark age. Historical records from Byzantium to China describe a sun that gave forth its light without brightness, like the moon during an eclipse. But what caused this terrifying confusion? And how did a single year of darkness trigger a cascade of famine, plague, and the collapse of civilizations that would reshape human history forever? Today, we are going to walk through the worst year to be alive, uncovering the scientific detective work that finally solved this ancient cold case and revealing the terrifying fragility of the world we take for granted. To understand the sheer magnitude of this catastrophe, we must look at the world as it stood before the darkness fell. The Roman Empire, though fractured, was experiencing a resurgence in the East under Emperor Justinian. Constantinople was the beating heart of civilization, a city of gold and marble, teeming with 500,000 souls. They believed they were on the verge of restoring the glory of Rome, unaware that the ground beneath their history was about to shift. Then, the spring of 536 arrived, and the atmosphere changed. A dry, dense fog settled over the Mediterranean, blocking the solar radiation essential for life. The Byzantine historian Procopius wrote with dread that men were free neither from war nor pestilence nor any other thing leading to death. The seasons lost their meaning. Summer never came. The temperature plummeted, initiating the coldest decade in the last 2,000 years, a sudden freezing epoch that would turn fertile fields into graveyards. As the sun remained dimmed, the immediate consequence was agricultural collapse on a global scale. In an era when nearly everyone relied on the harvest to survive the winter, the failure of crops was a death sentence. In Mesopotamia, snow fell in the summer. In China, the stars were lost from view, and frost killed the wheat in July, leading to a famine that wiped out nearly 80% of the population in some northern regions. This was not merely a bad harvest. It was a biological shock to the human system. Malnutrition weakened the immune systems of millions, leaving them vulnerable to what came next. The darkness had primed the population for disaster, and nature was about to deliver a second, even more lethal blow. While the world shivered in the volcanic winter, trade ships continued to dock at the ports of the Mediterranean, carrying grain, oil, and an invisible passenger that would thrive in the cooler temperatures. In 541, just a few years after the sun went dark, the bubonic plague arrived in the Egyptian port of Pelusium. Known today as the Plague of Justinian, it was the first pandemic of its kind in recorded history. The bacteria, carried by fleas on rats, found a human population that was starving cold and huddled together for warmth. The result was apocalyptic. In Constantinople, the bodies piled up faster than they could be buried, with reports of 10,000 people dying every single day. The emperor himself fell ill, and though he survived, his empire effectively died with the victims. The dream of a reunited Rome was buried in mass graves, all because the climate had turned against them. To fully grasp the horror of 536, we must travel north, away from the stone streets of Constantinople to the wooden longhouses of Scandinavia. Here, the event did not just destroy a harvest. It destroyed a belief system and birthed a legend that would echo for 1,000 years. In the freezing lands of Sweden and Norway, the summer of 536 never arrived. Archaeological evidence paints a haunting picture of abandonment. Nearly 75% of villages in parts of Sweden were deserted during this period. We find gold and precious artifacts buried in the ground, not as hoards of the future, but as desperate, final offerings to gods who had gone silent. This specific climate catastrophe is now believed by many scholars to be the historical basis for the myth of Fimbulwinter, the terrible 3-year winter that precedes Ragnarok, the end of the world in Norse mythology. For the people living through it, this was not a story. It was the end. The sun had been swallowed by the wolves, and the bonds of society were snapping under the weight of the frost. The desperate migration of these northern tribes, fleeing the ice, pushed them southward, triggering a domino effect of conflict that hammered against the borders of the weakened Roman world. While the north froze in silence, the east was descending into chaos. In China, the catastrophe was recorded with bureaucratic precision, making the horror even more vivid. The history of the southern dynasties records that yellow dust rained down like snow, a direct eyewitness account of the volcanic ash falling thousands of miles from its source. In the summer of 536, frost killed the crops in the vital Yellow River Basin. By September, 80% of the population in the Hebei province had perished. The famine was so severe that historical texts recount the collapse of social order, where families were forced to trade their children or resort to unthinkable acts to survive. The ruling Northern Wei dynasty, unable to feed its people or maintain order, disintegrated into civil war. The mandate of heaven had clearly been withdrawn. This was not just a weather event. It was a political guillotine that severed the continuity of one of the world's oldest civilizations, leading to decades of fragmentation before unity could be restored. Across the vast expanse of Pacific Ocean, the darkness claimed victims who had no contact with Rome or China. In the coastal deserts of modern-day Peru, the Moche civilization was renowned for its intricate pottery, massive pyramids, and complex irrigation systems. But around this exact time, the Moche faced a climate shift that would break their society. Ice cores from the Andes confirmed that the cooling event disrupting the global weather patterns caused 30 years of intense drought followed by massive flooding. The Moche leaders, whose authority rested on their ability to mediate with the gods for rain and fertility, were exposed as powerless. The archaeological record shows a sudden increase in internal violence and fortifications. The people were no longer fighting foreign enemies. They were fighting each other for the last scraps of arable land. The Great Pyramids were abandoned to the encroaching desert, leaving behind a silent testament to how quickly a complex society can crumble when the environment turns hostile. For centuries, historians relied on vague written accounts to piece this puzzle together, often dismissing the dimmed sun as a metaphor for political turmoil or religious allegory. It is only recently, through the lens of modern science, that we have pierced the veil of the year 536. By analyzing ice cores drilled from the depths of glaciers in Greenland and Antarctica, scientists have found the chemical fingerprints of a cataclysmic event. These frozen time capsules reveal massive spikes in sulfate concentrations, pointing to a volcanic eruption of colossal proportions. The leading theory suggests a massive eruption in Iceland or possibly North America, which spewed millions of tons of ash and sulfur dioxide into the upper atmosphere. This aerosol veil reflected the sunlight back into space, cooling the planet almost instantly. In 2018, a team led by historian Michael McCormick and glaciologist Paul Majewski analyzed ice from the Swiss Alps. Using a laser to carve slivers of ice representing just a few days of snowfall from 1,500 years ago, they found microscopic shards of volcanic glass. By analyzing the chemical composition of this glass, they traced it to the source. This discovery was a smoking gun. It proved that the ancients were not exaggerating. They were reporting the news. This scientific breakthrough forces us to reevaluate the entire timeline of the Dark Ages. It wasn't a gradual decline caused by moral decay or barbarian invasions alone, but sudden, violent shock to the planetary system that no civilization, no matter how advanced, could have prepared for. The recovery from this cataclysm was agonizingly slow. The late Antique Little Ice Age, as scientists now call it, lasted from 536 to roughly 660 AD. This century-long chill reshaped the map of the world. To fully appreciate the scope of the year 536, we must look beyond the immediate death toll and examine how it dismantled the machinery of the ancient world. Before this decade of cold, the Mediterranean economy was a complex, interconnected web. Olive oil from Tunisia was sold in the markets of Italy. Pottery from Turkey was found on dinner tables in Britain. But as the Ice Age set in, this globalized system shattered. With crop yields plummeting, the surplus food that fueled long-distance trade evaporated. It became too dangerous and too expensive to transport goods when every region was hoarding what little they had. We see this in the archaeological record. The volume of shipwrecks in the Mediterranean, a key indicator of economic activity, drops precipitously during the mid-6th century. The grand, open economy of the Roman era was replaced by a localized, defensive survivalism. Cities shrank. Walls grew higher, and the horizon of the average person narrowed from the width of an empire to the edge of their own village. This was the moment the Middle Ages effectively began, not with a trumpet blast, but with the quiet, desperate closing of doors against the cold. This climatic chaos also acted as a grand accelerator of political history, particularly in the British Isles. In 536, Britain was already a fractured land, a patchwork of Romano-British kingdoms struggling to hold back the tide of Anglo-Saxon migration. The wasteland described in early Welsh poetry and arguably echoed in the Arthurian legends of a wounded kingdom likely has its roots in this ecological disaster. The failure of harvest destabilized the native British kings, whose authority was tied to the land's fertility. As famine weakened the established order, the Anglo-Saxon newcomers, who were perhaps better adapted to the colder, harsher agricultural realities of the north, found it easier to advance. The demographic map of England was rewritten in these starving years. Further east, the darkness of 536 set the stage for one of the most rapid conquests in human history. The two superpowers of the day, the Byzantine Empire and the Sassanid Empire of Persia, had spent decades exhausting themselves in a brutal war, unaware that nature was draining their batteries. The plague and the famine had hollowed out their populations and emptied their treasuries. When the armies of Islam emerged from the Arabian Peninsula in the 7th century, they did not face the mighty legions of the past. They faced the hollowed-out shells of empires that had never recovered from the climatic downturn. The Arabs, hardened by the desert environment and perhaps less reliant on the specific agricultural cycles that had devastated the northerners, moved into a power vacuum created by the volcano. It is a sobering thought that the religious and political map of the modern Middle East might look completely different today if a volcano in Iceland hadn't erupted centuries earlier, weakening the guardians of the old order. Yet, amidst the collapse, the human story of this era is also one of incredible ingenuity and adaptation. When the old ways of farming failed, humanity didn't just lay down and die, they innovated. The cooling climate made wheat, the staple crop of Rome, difficult to grow in northern Europe. In response, we see a gradual agricultural shift toward rye, a much hardier grain that could withstand the shorter summers and colder soil. This dietary shift wasn't just about food. It changed the culture. Rye required different processing, different storage, and eventually different tools. This necessity likely accelerated the adoption of the heavy moldboard plow, a technology that would eventually allow Northern Europe to become the agricultural powerhouse of the medieval period. The Year of Darkness forced a technological evolution that would eventually feed the population boom of the High Middle Ages. The psychological impact of the darkness also left a permanent scar on the human consciousness, reshaping faith and philosophy. In a world where the sun could disappear and the plague could strike without warning, the confident, human-centric philosophies of the classical world seemed inadequate. People turned inward. The explosion of monasticism in Europe and the intensification of apocalyptic theology can be traced to this era of uncertainty. If the physical world was unreliable, the only safety lay in the spiritual. Monasteries became the arks of civilization, preserving knowledge and literacy while the outside world froze. The stoic resilience that characterizes the early medieval mind was forged in the long shadow of the volcanic winter. They learned to live with a constant proximity to death, creating a culture that was darker, perhaps, but also profoundly tough. As we stand here today, looking back at the ice cores and the ruined cities, the year 536 serves as more than just a historical curiosity. It is a mirror. It shows us that civilization is a delicate contract with the environment. We often believe that our technology makes us immune to the whims of nature, but the Romans believed the same of their aqueducts and their roads. One geological hiccup in the northern hemisphere unraveled 1,000 years of progress. The survivors of 536 were the ancestors of the modern world. They endured the darkness, they adapted their crops, they restructured their societies, and they kept the flame of humanity burning when the sun refused to shine. Thank you for journeying back into the shadows of history with us. It is a chilling reminder of the power of nature, but also a testament to survival. If a similar volcanic winter were to happen today, with our modern technology but heavy reliance on global supply chains, how do you think our current civilization would cope compared to the empires of antiquity? I'd love to read your theories and insights in the comments below. If you found this exploration into the past fascinating, please like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into the turning points of history. Until next time, keep looking for the light.